Central Intelligence is directed by Rawson Marshall Thurber, co-written by him, Ike Barinholtz, and David Stassen, and stars Kevin Hart, Dwayne Johnson, Amy Ryan, and Daniel Nicolet. So Central Intelligence is about this guy, Calvin Joyner, played by Kevin Hart, who was a really cool dude in high school, but now 20 years later, he finds himself having marriage problems and he's stuck in a job that he doesn't like. But one day he all of a sudden bumps into his old schoolmate, Robbie Weirdick, played by Dwayne Johnson, who was bullied for being fat in high school, but now he goes by the name Bob Stone. He looks like The Rock and he works for the CIA. So Bob drags a very reluctant Calvin into a mission to save the world. Now I find it really weird how I was initially not anticipating Finding Dory, but I was looking forward to this movie, and I'll admit that the trailers got me. I thought it was going to be really funny. I like both of these actors. Unfortunately, I just don't think it's a very good movie at all. The plot here is convoluted as all hell. It's not very funny, although I will say that Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson are consistently fun to watch. The biggest issue that Central Intelligence has is that it does not know what kind of movie it wants to be. You know, on the label, it's an action comedy, but it spends a lot of time on dramatic aspects, especially like fleshing out these themes about bullying and marriage and friendship. And don't get me wrong, these are promising themes, but they're not woven together very well. They're not synthesized into a whole, and so you have just these individual pieces that aren't really delved into that well, so as a result, all of them come off as very flat and generic. Unfortunately, this includes the comedy, which is of course the biggest aspect of this movie, and I would actually kind of put the blame on the director, Rawson Marshall Thurber, because his comedic timing is just really way off here. There's no good build up to the laughs. Like, the jokes are delivered as if something funny is already happening, and then they're just like, oh, but wait till you hear this joke, and then it just kind of, you know, falls flat. So there is an imbalance of tone among all these themes that this movie is trying to tackle, but even within the comedy, there's already an imbalance there, because even the comedy can't decide if it wants to be realistic or just really over the top. The action in the movie is okay. It could have been a lot better. It's not Taken 3 horrible, but the plot in this movie is just so generically action. It relies too much on all these lame twists instead of, you know, giving us a straightforward, satisfying action movie. Speaking of which, this movie just doesn't seem very ambitious with its action, and I don't mean that every action movie has to reinvent the wheel or anything. It's just that there's such a shortage of big set pieces or even just simple fights in the movie, and the fights that are there just aren't really infused with comedy either. So again, there's that clashing tone. I really hate comparing movies, but I just couldn't help but think of the movie Spy, which came out last year, directed by Paul Feig, starring Melissa McCarthy. That was an action comedy that really did both of those things very well at the same time. And here, this movie just can't pull that off. You know, it has a $50 million budget, but not even like the visual effects look that good. It feels kind of like a B movie and not in an intentional way. And it doesn't use basic elements of filmmaking like sound and production design and cinematography to its advantage, so it does come off as, again, very generic. And this movie is just paced really badly. I'm sorry, but it was so slow. Like, it moved at such a slow pace, and I remember checking the time, like what I thought was like nearing the third act of the movie, and we were only about halfway through. The editor here, Michael L. Sale, keeps the film focused so long on these conversations that are more dramatic than comedic, and it just really pulls down the momentum of the movie. To the point that I would actually argue that like the first maybe 30 minutes of this movie are more of a drama than an action or a comedy, which would not be a problem if the movie wasn't trying to set itself up as an action comedy. There's no sense of mounting tension or stakes. Even when all the big action stuff is happening at the end, you don't feel like the world is at stake. And for a movie called Central Intelligence, there's not a lot of spy stuff happening. You know, no one really tries to, figure things out through intellect. On the positive end, though, I will say that Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart really are super fun to watch. Their chemistry is really good. The funniest bits in the movie really do come from just them simply interacting. Like, the funniest parts are actually in the bloopers before the credits, which is kind of a bad sign. But it's still cool to see them kind of doing this role reversal, because Dwayne Johnson is doing the more comedic stuff while Kevin Hart is playing more of the straight man, and they're both good in these roles. Amy Ryan and Daniel Nicolet are also quite good given with what they're given. And Aaron Paul has a very small role in this movie, but if you're a Breaking Bad fan, he will not disappoint. And like I said, while the movie doesn't really do justice to all its themes that it's trying to tackle, the little that we do get is definitely interesting, especially with the whole bullying thing. It's nice to see how they kind of fleshed out Dwayne Johnson's character with the whole bullying aspect. And if it counts for anything, the soundtrack to this movie it's pretty bitchin'. I mean, that's the first word that really came to my head when I heard the music. But in the end, Central Intelligence is pretty difficult for me to recommend. It's very meh. It's a pretty mediocre movie. I guess only see it if you're really a hardcore fan of Kevin Hart or Dwayne Johnson or both of these actors. So those are my thoughts on Central Intelligence. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.